So this is my BCL Siberian, and this is the only Canadian firearm that I own, and there's a reason for that. I'm just going to say it as a blanket statement that pretty much all Canadian firearms suck, and we have a really good history of making terrible firearms. Look no farther than the Ross rifle. So why do Canadian firearms suck? I have four reasons why I think that they suck. So my first reason is lack of market. So they say there's 2.2 million firearms owners, and that's just licensed ones in Canada. It's probably closer to 3 million if you add everybody up. So that's about 10% of our population. So, it's more common than hockey. There's more registered firearms owners than there is hockey players in Canada. So that's essentially our natural sport, but we're only really known for hockey for some reason. Let's compare that to the States. So they generally say, because there's no real way to track it, but on the lowest end, they say 30% of the population owns firearms. So 30% is over 100 million people in the States, and they say 30 to 40%, so that's a pretty large margin of people that actually own firearms. There are a lot of firearms in the States and a lot of firearms owners. If almost half your population owns firearms, that's absolutely insane, especially when you have such a large population. So that is a very, very big market, and in Canada it's seen more of like a niche market. So number two is lack of necessity. So in Canada, firearms ownership is seen more of like a privilege rather than a right. So it being a privilege and rather than a right, the emphasis really isn't on absolutely reliability. You can bet your life on this. You can go to war or whatever with this platform. These are seen basically as toys that you can go to the Crown Lands and go put bullets into targets. That's what these things are seen as. They aren't seen as something that you can actually bet your life on. And if you talk to a lot of Canadian gun owners, they probably wouldn't base their life or bet their life on any of the AR-180 platforms, because honestly they suck. There's a lot of parts breakages, whatever. So if in the States you have a society that puts a lot of emphasis on self-defense, and most of their firearms are based around self-defense, and that firearm doesn't live up to it, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to get sued. And in Canada, that just isn't the case. It's seen more of like a privilege and more of a toy rather than an actual weapon that you can bet your life on. Number three, so lack of good parts because of the bans. So as much as I love to bash Canadian manufacturers, I can only bash them so much because there's a lot of lack of good parts, because AR-15s, the most common prolific platform in the Western world, got banned in Canada in 2020. And a whole lot of parts did as well, because the less people are bringing in less AR-15 parts, so they're generally harder to get, or they're just storing them, just panic buying them. So there's a lot less of good, decent quality parts. There's a lot of crap that you'll find on various sites around here, and all of it is just like bottom dollar tier stuff that in the States they probably wouldn't even wipe their ass with it. It's like the AR-180 base platforms. I had a WSMCR and it broke the firing pin retaining pin, and I mentioned in my other video about that. They know better. They shouldn't be using a hollow roll pin for the firing pin retaining pin that just wears down the sidewalls with that firing pin going back and forth, and it just breaks the firing pin. They know better than that. It's very well researched, all of that stuff. So I'm willing to bet that they probably just couldn't get the actual parts, and they had to use a cheaper, crappier substitute. And number four, I would say, is lack of testing. So in American culture, if you follow a lot of the quote-unquote gun tubers or whatever, all of them are sent free firearms and free ammunition that they just basically run right into the ground. In Canada, that isn't the case. Maybe you might get a firearm here and there, but there's only a couple very popular Canadian YouTubers that do a lot of gun content. Really isn't worth it, and that kind of bleeds into the other discussions of it's just such a niche market that generally speaking, unless there's a couple people on Reddit and stuff like that that run these things hard and through tests and through competition and all of that. But generally speaking, I don't really see that from the manufacturer. I don't see the manufacturer putting 12,000 rounds through these things when 1,000 rounds of 223 or whatever is gonna be $950, something like that, something crazy like that. Ammunition's very expensive, all of that stuff. So it seems like they just kind of slap these things together and just give them out, and then they're just like, okay, just run these until they break. And unfortunately, it's only 250 rounds or whatever until these things break. So, I mean, that's just kind of a rant of why Canadian guns really suck. And I think the biggest driving factor, like I mentioned, is just lack of market and lack of necessity. These things aren't seen as things that you can bet your life on. They're seen as range toys. They're seen as something that you can go blow up pumpkins in October, or maybe go hunt coyotes or something like that. These aren't seen as something that you can actually bet your life on. These are just seen as toys. And if anybody is looking around for or asks for suggestions of any kind of new rifle to buy or anything like that, generally speaking, what I say is, if it says made in Canada, don't buy it unless you really want to tinker and finagle and really just kind of do a whole lot of work to make these things run properly. And for $1,400 to $2,500, I don't think that should be the case. Let me know what you think.